recording and then our broadcast, and we'll look for our attendees.
Okay, good evening, everyone. We'll officially call the meeting to order in just a couple minutes. We'll, as per usual, we'll allow a minute or so for the remainder of our panelists and attendees to get on board, so to speak. I see there are already 7 attendees, so that's good. They've gotten in, and panelists, I think let's see. Oh, good. Let's see. Let's see. Yeah, do you see Christopher Sautel, Andy, and the attendees?
I do actually, moving over right now, actually.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Hi, Chris.
Hi, everybody. Thank you.
Yeah, we've got 7:02. I think we have the commissioners that are going to be here. Let me just take a look at the list here. I don't see Mr. Marquis. Alan Marquis said, I think he said he was going to join. We'll give another few seconds and then we'll get started because we do have a quorum. So we don't have to necessarily hold everybody up. We do have a pretty full agenda tonight, so we'll want to move along briskly if possible. All right, I've got 7:03. All right, so I will officially call the meeting to order. This is the meeting of the Newburyport Historical Commission for the 11th of April, 2024, virtual meeting via Zoom. So please be aware that this, like all the other virtual meetings, is being recorded. I'll start as per usual with a roll call, which also lets us check our panelists' audio. So Andrew Bernhard.
Here.
Okay,
Here.
great. All right. Biff Baus.
Here.
Okay, thanks. Mark Syndrome.
Present.
Thank you, Mark. Christopher Fay.
I'm here.
Yep, I see you there. Great.
Present.
Yep.
Yep.
Thanks, Chris. Chris Sautel, I see you there, right?
I'm here.
Yep, audio is good. And we don't have Ellen Marquis yet, so I'll mark him out for now. And you have myself, Glenn Richards, the chair, speaking. Let me just make a note about Alan so we have that, and we'll get started. Okay, Andy Port is here running the meeting, and note taker Gretchen Joy I'll mention as well. Now, most people are by now familiar with the Zoom meeting format, but if there is a public comment period, I'll review the procedure for that at that time. And I'll just make a quick mention that current plans, we'll mention this again later possibly, is that the next meeting on the 24th, I think it is, will be in person at the Senior Center. So we'll talk about that a bit further down the agenda. So we have 5 demolition delay applications, so we should get going. It's a bit of an unusual situation. I'll give a very brief intro. Now, I believe Mr. Duchesne is here, right? Did I see him? Yes. So what I'm going to do is just have a brief introduction to put these first 3 applications, 5 and 11 Spofford Street and 570 Merrimack Street, kind of into context as to what we need to do and so forth. And then I'll allow Mr. Duchesne to speak, and I believe he has a presentation. We do need to take each of the 3 applications separately, even though they are for the same applicant and so on. So there are 3 structures that are part of one proposed project, and the applicant wishes to completely demolish the existing structures to enable a significant redevelopment project. They are here tonight to have the commission review the structures, which all meet the legal definition of historically significant due to their age, and determine whether each one shall also be, quote, preferably preserved. Which, as you know, would impose the 1-year demolition delay. And the applicant has indicated that they expect that to happen and plan to wait it out. In cases of complete demolition like this, a demolition plan per se isn't required. And for these 3 applications, there are no proposed rebuild plans or anything like that, as as to what might be built, which is something we might usually see. So we'll consider each property separately as shown on the agenda. So the first one is 5 Spofford Street. Again, this was listed as 1869. Now, is Mr. Okay, we have you talking enabled, Mr. Duchesne. Do you want to cover? I know you got all 3 properties on here. Do you want to just briefly say something about? We're going to take 5 Spoffords first.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, and good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Douglas Duchesne from Finner and Nicholson. Yes, I've structured the presentation so that I can give you a very quick overview of the overall plan for the properties, and then I've broken it down into modules where I'll address each property individually, so that I won't waste time giving an overview for each property. So I think it will make our time much more efficient, but I will do it in such a manner that we take each one separately.
Okay.
So if I could begin, Andy, if we go to the next slide, please. Again, as chairman, members of the board, good evening. Douglas Duchesne from Finner and Nicholson. I'm representing Eric Premack. Mr. Premack is under purchase and sales agreement to buy the properties at 5, 7, and 11 Spofford Street, as well as 570 and 572 Merrimack Street. Everett Chandler is our engineer on the project. Thomas Hughes is our environmental specialist. Next slide.
I'm sorry, Mr. Shane, I hate to interrupt you like this, but it sounded like you said 5, 7, and 11 Spofford Street. Did I mishear that?
No, there are actually 5 parcels that are involved in this project and in the purchase. Only 5, 11, and 570, 5 and 11 Spofford and 570 Merrimack qualify for the demo delay hearing.
Oh, okay, I see. Thank
you. And if I could, as was stated earlier, Mr. Chairman, my client would actually like to raise in their entirety the structures at 5 and 11 Spofford Street, as well as 5 Merrimack Street, so that new structures can be built within that property. As you mentioned, as determined by the zoning enforcement officer, because each of the 3 dwellings before you this evening are over 75 years old. Although they're outside the DOD and the DCOD districts, we have filed separate delay applications for each of the properties. Next slide, please, Andy. Existing conditions plan, if we could jump to the next plan. Members of the commission, I just wanted to give you an aerial overview of the property. As you can see, for the most part, it's located at the intersection of Merrimack Street and Spofford Street. I've identified for you on this plan the location of 570 Merrimack Street, 11 Spofford, and 5 Spofford. The property in between there is where we find 572 Merrimack and 7 Spofford. So my client's under contract to buy all of this property and would like to redevelop it with new homes. If we could go to the next slide. This, ladies and gentlemen, is just a graphic representation of an A&R plan, which essentially carves the properties into 4 distinct building lots. We will not have to undergo a subdivision review for this. We're actually able to create 4 buildable lots from the totality of these separate building lots, and we will create 4 new lots on which my client would propose to build a new structure on each of the 4 lots. So that's a general overview of why and how all of the lots before you tonight are sort of integrated into the separate project. And now, if I could go to the next slide, please, we'll focus on 5 Spofford Street first. According to the city records, 5 Spofford Street was built in 1869. And as I will address in just a minute, there was a citizen submittal providing a very comprehensive history of the property, in which they determined, or the person filing it had determined that the house was likely built in the early 1800s. So unfortunately, I had to go along. I was not privy to that material, so I went along with the city's history, which said it was built in 1869. I was not able to locate any district data sheets or other Form B materials addressing this project. I could not find this subject property located on the Macris database site. However, as I mentioned, there has been a citizens memorandum submitted, which provides history, some history on the home, but a rather extensive history on the family that first built the home and what they did over their lifetime. So I'm sure the board has had a chance to look at that. So now I'd like to give you some more specific photographs. So again, if you look in the right upper corner of this plan, you can see that I've identified 5 Spofford. It's on the smaller of the lots, but it does sit right there on Spofford Street. Next plan, picture, please. This is a picture of 5 Spofford from the street. This is essentially the front of the home, although it doesn't face directly to the street. It is sort of sideways on the lot, but I assume this was the front of the house, given that it was it has the front door. Next slide, please. This would be a picture from the right-hand side, left-hand side of the home. As you would look up Spofford Street. Next picture, please. This is the I'm sorry, that picture was the right the I guess left-hand side. This is the other left-hand. This is the left-hand side that faces what I believe would be 3 Spofford Street, and I'll show you some neighborhood photos in a minute. But again, just provides a picture of the other side of that side of the home. The next picture is the back of the home. So you can see that the existing architecture and structure is pretty uniform within the structure. It appears to me, and I am not an expert, but there's a wide variety of window styles. There's some 2/2s, there's some 3/3s, and I think a couple of 2/2 windows. So a potpourri of window styles, although the siding and the structure itself seems to be relatively uniform. With respect to the neighborhood in which it sits and the abutting properties, the next photo actually shows the house. I'm sorry, this is the 4th side of the home. I'm sorry, I didn't walk through those correctly. But again, you can see a couple of different window styles here, although the siding seems to be consistent. So this is the home to the, as you're standing on Spofford Street, you look to the left. I suspect this is 3 Spofford. This is the home that is directly abutting to the left side of the home. I don't have a picture, but what abuts the other side is 7 Spofford, which is actually set way back on the lot, so it really doesn't abut the 5 Spofford. But this is to the left. Now, if we turn from the front door of 5 Spofford and we look across Spofford Street to the left, you can see to the far left of this photo is where the dog park is. And then this is the first closest house directly across Spofford, sort of looking slightly to your left. The next picture is the house I would consider directly across the street from 5 Spofford. And I think I have 2 pictures of that. One, sort of this distant shot, and then the next one is a close-up of that home. You can see, unlike the previous brown home, I don't believe this house is historic in nature. And then to the right, to the right of this home, farther down, adjacent to where the chain bridge is, they are in the process of, and have been for some years, in constructing this new home. So essentially the surrounding neighborhood here consists of what I would obviously consider a beautiful historic home on the left side, 7 Spofford on the right side, which is a brick building not subject to your demo delay. Then directly across the street from the home, we have sort of that beautiful brown historic home, a fairly modern home, and then this ultimate new construction home. So kind of a potpourri, if you will, of surrounding structures. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I honestly have no further information to provide to you with respect to this home. We actually have had a structural engineer go in and take a look at the home. The home is in very rough condition. Unfortunately, it is open to the weather in some locations. And so the interior of the house has got, significant moisture damage. We also, the home currently is, excuse me, currently inhabited by some wildlife. We've identified at very least a raccoon family that is sheltering in the home, and that is due to the fact that there are openings within some of the foundation and walls and even some of the roof fascia that is allowing squirrels, raccoons, and other assorted critters to get in there. There has not been any significant work or maintenance done in this home for many, many years. Our structural engineer concluded that the home, he could not determine that it would be impossible to restore this home. However, so we could not provide a statement that this home is structurally unsound to a point that it could not be restored. However, it was made very clear to us that the work that would be needed to be undertaken to restore this, including significant foundation work, structural beam replacement, and pretty much it would require a gut renovation. It would be incredibly difficult, expensive, beyond a point where if you were to take this home and actually restore it, that when you were done, the cost to restore it would likely far exceed the value of the home restored. It's kind of in that bad of condition. So again, our engineers have concluded, they would not conclude, and I think it's because they feel, just about anything could be restored. So they could not say that it couldn't be restored, but they did warn us that it's, it would not be financially feasible, would be very complicated, and at the end of the day, you would have far more money invested in the home than it would be worth. So again, I guess financial infeasibility is what we're faced with regard to considering any kind of reconstruction of this home. My client understands the fact that there is we're certainly more aware of the fact now that there is some history to the home with respect to who built it. Again, a very comprehensive report was submitted to you, and I am by no means no expert, but I certainly taking the information would agree that Mr. Jackman, who built the home, was part of what became a very famous family in town. And we learned all about what that family did and where they went and what they did. But with the exception of the fact that the home was built by the father of George W. Jackman, shipbuilder and mayor, and may have been and was owned at some point by other members or ancestors of that original builder, the home itself does not seem to have been involved directly in, wasn't used for any activity or use that would tie it into that, that aspect of Newburyport's history. My client is well aware, though, that, this house, the commission may determine that this house is worthy of preservation and employ a 1-year moratorium on any kind of demolition. However, he did want me to offer to the commission that if there was anything that we could do in terms of offering the home, the structure itself for sale, for to be moved, potentially deconstructed and reconstructed, or whether or not there would be value to sort of historically or salvaging of any historical aspects of this home. My client is more than willing to do that. We would even be willing to potentially advertise that the home for sale or for deconstruction or again salvage. And so he did want me to speak with the commission about in situations like this where from my client's perspective, the home does need to be raised. There is no financially feasible mechanism for preserving it. That what other things could we do during what may be a historical demo delay to make an effort to in some way preserve aspects of this home or the structure that would at least show the commission that we've made every effort possible to do something, and therefore, perhaps consider sometime down the road after we've made those efforts and hopefully connected with someone to do something, whether the commission would then consider a release of the delay in light of our good faith efforts to do what we can to preserve the structure to the best of our ability.
Yes, well, is that it
Yes,
for now?
sir.
Okay. As I assume you probably know, the ordinance does contain provision for something like that as an alternative to waiting a full year if you wanted to end my understanding of it anyway, and
Yeah.
Andy, you can correct me if I'm in error about this, if you can demonstrate that you've made a good faith effort to find a buyer or someone who's willing to, well, the expectation there was you'd find a buyer for the property. It doesn't really talk about moving it or salvaging or whatever, but something like that might be able to be worked out. We're not really in a position to get into all that here tonight, but
Sure.
that is something that you could certainly explore with the planning department if the 1-year demo delay is imposed.
Yes, sir.
Um,
I just wanted to let the board
Yep.
know that we were,
Yep.
we would intend to do that.
Okay. Okay. All right. Well, that's good to know. I've been struggling, because we have, 3 of these and all. What I'm tempted to do, I know I see that there are a lot of attendees that I, know aren't presenters, they're members of the public, and they may want to have comments on this. So, and the public comment period is not required on this particular
Mhm.
hearing, although it would be required for the, um, if it's deemed to be considered for preservation as part of the demo delay phase of the hearing,
Mhm.
we would have public comment then. Um, so I'm just thinking. So we probably my fellow commissioners. I think we can. Do you do you feel a need for? Well, first of all, do you have any questions for Mr. Deshane on the structure to help? It's already historically significant by definition on the ordinance. However, we need to, so the first decision we need to make, is it or is it not considered for preservation? And if it is considered for preservation, since there is no real formal demo plan, we can quickly move to voting as to whether it's preferably preserved or not. If it is, then it would start the demo delay, and as some of what we just talked about. And if not, then they wouldn't have to wait the 1 year. So anyway, let me first turn to you folks. Mark, I see a hand up. What's your opinion on this?
Yes, I'm wondering how long the house has been unoccupied.
I don't have a specific date, but based on my observations, it has been a couple of years perhaps, or more that it's been unoccupied, although I do understand that electricity and utilities have been provided to the property through a good part of that non-residency. But based on my, again, personal inspection, it has been a number of years, yes.
All right. I think the first part of our initial decision as to whether it's considered for preservation or not, it seems to me is fairly an easy decision. Is there a motion that the structure be considered should be considered for preservation?
I'll make that motion to consider it for preservation as well.
That sounded like Mr. Sawtelle, right, Chris?
Yes, it was. Thank you.
Okay.
And I'll second that. This is Biff.
Okay. Biff, thank you, Biff. Okay, so we'll go around our usual order here. Andrew Bernhardt, your vote on that.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Biff Baus.
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Mark Syndrome.
Yes.
Thank you. Christopher Fay.
Yes.
Thank you. Chris Sartell.
Yes.
Okay. Now, Alan, I saw you did join, Alan Marquis. I think you pretty much heard most of the presentation, right?
Yes, yes, I did.
Yeah. Yeah. So would you like to vote on this?
Yes, and I would say
Okay.
yes.
Okay. And that was also your vote, I assume, right?
Yes, this is.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Alan. And so I'll make it unanimous, the chair. So that's 1, 2, 3, 7 affirmative votes. So the House is considered for preservation. Now, what normally happens, and well, and will happen, is that demo plan review, which shouldn't take very long because the demo plan is, as it stands now, is to completely demolish the building, and there are no plans as to what would go up instead at this point, and probably won't be for a while. So, given that, we well, that's the review pretty much. We'll have a public comment period. The Let me just preface the public comment period by saying that there are limits to the jurisdiction of the Historical Commission here. We can either say it's preferably preserved, in which case it imposes the 1 year delay, or not. And other, whether it's other zoning considerations or butters considerations, whatever, really aren't part of it. But if you do have a public comment, I'll formally open that. And you see if you're in the Zoom meeting, you can see the instructions there. But if you need to raise your hand so we know that you have a comment you'd like to make. And if you're on a telephone, perchance, you would use *9 to raise or lower your hand, and *6 to mute and unmute yourself. When you hear your name recognized, that means we've unmuted you on our end. So I do see one hand up, so we'll recognize Louise Duda. Did you have a public comment? We are enabling your, okay, it looks like your audio is enabled, so go ahead. State your name and address per, standard public comment procedure, and please try to be brief.
My name is Louise Duda, and I live at 6 Spofford Street, directly across from this house. And I'm just concerned, it sounds like nothing is gonna happen now for a year, but I'm just concerned about the height and kind of building that's gonna be considered there.
Yeah, that may, okay. All I can say to that, Louise, is that those concerns will probably have an opportunity to be raised when this comes before the Zoning Board of Appeals for, whatever's permits and lot changes and whatever happens at that point. And other than that, of course, anything that's built would need to conform to whatever the zoning requirements are in that section of the city in terms of, well, whatever, all the various building requirements.
Do you know what those are?
No, I'm not an expert in that area, but I assume they're the usual setbacks from property lines. I think citywide, there's a height limit of, I don't know, 35 some odd feet.
Correct.
Yeah. So, but yeah, that's really not something that the historical commission would get into. All right.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Duda. I see Rita Mihalik. Would you like to say something?
Yes, good evening. My name is Rita Mihalik, 53 Warren Street, Newburyport. I'm a member of the Newburyport Preservation Trust, and my comments represent the Newburyport Preservation Trust. The Newburyport Preservation Trust strongly opposes the demolition of the 3 historic structures mentioned and proposed in the pre-MAC redevelopment at 5 Spofford, 11 Spofford, and 570 Merrimack. The loss of these historic buildings right at the main gateway into Newburyport would be a shame. Rather than demolish, these structures are still good and could be renovated and given modest additions and thereby remain the important part of Newburyport's heritage that it is, and possibly even contribute to more affordable housing. We respectfully request that the Historical Commission determined that all 3 buildings are historically significant and preferably preserved. If that is determined, we would look forward to a full public hearing at a future date. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Malik. And it looks like those are the only hands I saw, so we'll close the public comment period. And Ms. Mahalik, your hand is still up, so you might want to use the Zoom controls to put that back down. So board, I'll turn to you. Does anyone have any comments, or before we take the vote on the motion that the structure is historically significant and preferably preserved? Sorry. I don't see. Okay, Alan Marquis, did you have a comment or question?
Yes, so guys, one of my comments would be, it's the people who are purchased the property, I feel like for us, it puts us in a little bit of a spot that they've come before us and not really talked. I don't know if they've done any research prior to purchasing the property and putting it in our hands to sort of give them leeway to knock these buildings down. And considering that they are fairly significant historically, I feel like that's I don't feel like it's a fair thing to put us in this position at this point to say, yeah, it's okay to clear the land and put up new homes there, or these homes that feel like are significant. That's my comment.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Alan. Would any Biff, did you want to make a comment also?
Sure. I think this case of these 3 homes is a real clear example of what this board is here for, to prevent this sort of thing from happening. I echo a lot of what the public comment period folks were saying about the importance of arriving into our town and seeing these historic buildings here. It would be a real shame if we were to lose them.
Yeah. Thank you, Biff. Would someone like to make the motion that the structure is historically significant and preferably preserved?
I'll make the motion that the property is historically significant and preferably preserved.
Okay, it sounded like Chris Sotel, right?
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Okay, is there a
I'll
second?
second the motion, Mark Sedron.
Okay, thank you, Mark. So, so just so everyone's clear, a yes vote means that the structure is preferably preserved and imposes a 1-year demo delay. A nay or no vote means that it's not preferably preserved and a demolition permit could be issued without delay, although there might be some delay for other reasons. So go around again. So Andrew Bernhardt, your vote. I didn't quite catch that, Andrew.
Yeah.
Okay, yes, that was I took that as a yes. Okay, Biff Bounce.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, we heard that loud and clear. Thank you, Andrew.
Oof.
Mark Syndrome.
Yes.
Okay, Chris Fay.
Yes.
Thank you. Chris Hotel.
Yes.
Okay, Alan Markey.
Yes.
Thank you, and Chair makes that unanimous as well. So the so we'll do that, and this isn't the appropriate time to get into it, but Mr. Duchesne and your client, you can and I'll talk to Andy and the planning office separately about what you discussed about finding alternatives to full demo. So you know, I think that would be something that's worthy of pursuing.
Yes, thank you, Mr.
All right, so the next one that's part of the same project we've been talking about is 11 Spofford Street, just right nearby. So Mr. Duchesne, did you want to go back to your presentation and say something about that one?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, and again, given that I've already done the overview
Right.
to show you the location of the 3 buildings, I'm going to just focus on the specifics with respect to 11 Spofford.
Mhm.
I do feel that this structure is significantly different in terms of 5 Spofford with respect to its historic um, nature and significance. The home at 11 Spofford Street, according to the records of the city, was built in 1879. Again, there are no district data sheets or Form B for this subject property. The property was not located on the Macris database. I would, point out that we have not received any comments or any further information with respect to, historical significance of this building or the who built it or, who lived in it. And I know that is one of the criteria that the board must look at in terms of determining historical significance. So again, no historical information is available, nor has any historical research or reports been done or submitted with respect to this property. So, but for the fact that it's over 75 years, its historical significance is unrecorded, so to speak. So to give you thank you, Andy, if we could go to that next slide. Again, here is the location of 11 Spofford. You can see it up at the center of the picture up top. It sits right on Spofford Street. And you can see that on one side of Spofford, 11 Spofford is Merrimack. On the other side is 572. And then you can see where 5 Spofford we were just discussing. This next photo is a front picture of the home itself as is seen from Spofford Street. You can see that to the left in the back there is a garage, brick garage that was built, and there's a shed type structure also behind. The next photo, thank you, Andy. This is a picture of the home from the left side. From what you see, looking at the from the driveway to 7 Spofford. The next photo is the I'm sorry, that was the side facing Merrimack. This is the side facing 5 Spofford and facing towards the chain bridge, so to speak. The next photo is the back of the home, as you can see. Spofford is on the opposite side of where this picture is. And then the last photo is just a close-up of the garage structure. We do not believe, nor is this over 100 years old. Not subject to your demo delay bylaw. In terms of the neighborhood, I'm going to present the same pictures that I did for 5 Spofford, because it technically sits between 5 Spofford and Merrimack. So this first picture is directly across the street, the dog park, Bosley up to the left, and then the historic structure, the brown house, directly across. And then there's the middle house, so to speak, directly across, although a little to the right of this home. The next photo is a close-up of that home, which you saw before. And then lastly is the new house. So this home sits, again, directly across from the same structures as 5 Spofford. Although the structures flanking it are different. There is no structure to the right, but rather open land up to Merrimack Street. And to the left is, the driveway for 572 Merrimack. They have 2 driveways, one from Spofford and one from Merrimack. And then, of course, 5 Spofford is to the left. So with respect to this home, members of the commission, again, there is no history. We were unable to find any historical information that clarified for us that this home was historically significant. And in terms of your analysis of historical significance, I've read that we look at things like its distinct features in terms of architectural features, cultural, political, economic, or social history of Newburyport. Again, there's no evidence of any cultural, political, economic, or social history associated with this home. It is deemed, as you know, because it's over 75 years, to be, at least in the first instance, historical significance. However, and I am probably the least expert on this, in my opinion, I'm really not sure if this house represents an architectural design that, although reflects 1800s construction, I'm not quite sure whether it appears to reflect architectural components that would make it significantly important or historically significant. I do know the windows in this home too are probably not the original windows, although I can't speak for the siding or the some of the window treatments. But again, I'd ask the board to consider, in determining the historical significance of this project or property, that other than its age, I really don't see where there's a significant amount of evidence implying that there is any cultural, political, economic, or social history associated with it. And I will leave it to the board, obviously, to determine whether this property has unique architectural components that would put it in the category of historically significant. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's really all I have to say, although I'm happy to answer any questions the board might have.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Sorry, thank you, Mr. Shanes. And I'll just quickly comment that the reading of the ordinance that we've been following is that since one of the defined or delineated definitions of historic is the 75-year mark, it's sort of automatically historically significant, but there is the question of, is it preferably preserved or not? So
I apologize. Yes.
Yeah, that's fine. So so anyway, so that's that. And then so first of all, I'll just see if anyone on the commission has a question or comment, a particular question for Mr. Duchesne about this. If that the chair would also be happy to entertain a motion that the structure is historically is historically significant and considered for preservation. Oh, I see some hands. So let's see. Biff, I think I saw you first.
Yeah, just I kind of thinking about what Alan Marquis had said earlier. I feel like there's not a lot of historical significance as far as who lives here because the research just hasn't been done.
Mhm, right.
And so to me that's a good time to say, well, then let's stop and let's find out. So that's just what I was feeling right now.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Biff. Um, the okay, and I also saw Mr. Sawtell, your hand was up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just looking at this house, and what I'm seeing, and like I said, I'm not an architect, I'm just a big fan of the houses. I see elements of kind of Gothic revival with, the tall windows and the very steep peaks and everything. Looking at this was what I think. And the second observation I had was concerning the garage in the back. Being that the of thinking we don't think it's 100 years old. I don't know if that is what we should be relying on. It probably deserves some research to look at a little bit closer. As Biff said earlier, the reason why there's no history that's written on it is because it hasn't been researched. And I believe there should be some due diligence to determine the exact age of the garage there. It's definitely not as old, or I think, as the house, but 100 years ago was only 1924. It wasn't that long ago, so we should consider that. And that's all.
I think I guess the two options are to somehow like continue this one to allow and ask for that research to be done, or go ahead and say kind of assume that there's some more to be found there, and still have the vote tonight on whether, and we can certainly vote on whether it's considered for preservation. And if that's affirmative, then we could either, then we could probably, I think the only option I can think of, and Andy, maybe you can help me out here, is that we, at least for this one, continue it to allow for the applicant to, provide some documentation. I know, more along the lines that we typically see from some of the other attorneys that present that have older maps. And I know this particular part of the city up near the Chambers there was not included in some of the historical surveys and so forth. So that's kind of understandable. And those Sanborn maps and so forth, a lot of them don't go up that far, at least, back early in the 20th century and late 19th. But they're probably, we are used to seeing significantly more documentation, or at least attempts at good faith efforts to find out more about the history. And I would have to agree with those comments myself.
Sorry, did you want me to speak to that, or?
Yeah, and yeah, if you have some enlightening comments on it, Andy, I'd love to hear them.
Sure. No, I'll, other than that exchange between you and the applicant, the only thing I guess I would add or offer to that is whether you want to consider making a determination relative to the primary structure there, and perhaps if there's a question or concern relative to the other structure, that be determined in consultation with the zoning administrator, because obviously there's a thorough look at some of these records through our office and through her before these things are reaching the board. So I guess the question there being, are you able to make a determination relative to the primary structure that's been discussed here, and make a recognition or a clear indication that you're not speaking to the second element there, that as I understand is not the subject of the request here, and that well, rather than sort of continuing the two together here, I guess I'll leave that to you.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, that would be our preference as well, in that we have not filed, for an analysis of the garage. Again, based on our understanding that it was not that old. certainly I will do the research to verify that. And if we are able to determine that it was over 100 years old, then we would be before you on a separate filing with regard to that structure. But I would ask, with all due respect, that the board take action with respect to the primary application here relative to 11 Spofford.
Okay. Yeah, I'm good with that because I think well, I'll tell you what I think in a minute, but but I think we can take the first vote on whether
Chris
yeah.
Fay has his hand up there.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thanks, Biff. Chris, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I have a question that we may not be able to answer based on the sort of unknown. I guess two things real quick. The garage seems to be part of the property of 11 Spofford Street. And so that's what it seems to be. But my bigger question is this entire lot, does anybody know what this was? Because it seems strange that 3 different homes would all come up for sale at roughly the same time. I've been driving past this for, I don't know how long they've been for sale. It has the property has like a hand pump right in the middle of it. That does not look like a garage to me. That was used to house a couple of cars. So does anyone have any idea? And if we don't, then I think I would want to know more information about this. Is not 3 separate. I know it's 3 separate lots, but what was this, or what is this place? This whole entire map that we're looking at.
Yeah, Chris, did you have a
Anyone can
chance to
help
look?
me?
I'm sorry, did you have a chance to look at the research that was done on number 5 Spofford? Because there was a lot of information there about the probable location of a boat building shipyard, a bit smaller than the ones further downriver. That was probably, Jackman's. And then I guess he moved down to like where that Merson plant is, that area around Merrimack Court and so on, where there was also the Courier shipyard. There was a number of shipyards right around that area. And you can, on this thing that we're looking at right now, that Andy went to, that you can see there's like a sort of what would you call it? A ditch or an inlet there. And this, what we're looking at right now, it's maybe there's two, that's by 72-24, that one. Yeah, thank you, Andy. And there's some of the outbuildings and things that were there. The supposition, I'm not sure that the researchers were completely 100% sure about it, but there were certainly indications that there was it was being used as a relatively small, by Newburyport standards, shipbuilding operation, and back in the earlier to mid 19th century.
So so that, and I apologize for I didn't see that.
Okay.
But I mean, then it would speak to the fact that shipbuilding in Newburyport is fairly significant.
Yep.
And fairly historic.
Yeah.
A major part.
Yeah. Well, this particular property on 11 looks like that was likely built after the whole era that there was active shipbuilding going on in that particular corner of the world. All right, but and I see Chris Hotel, did you, your hand out? Were you done, Chris Fay? Chris Fay? Were you all set?
I'm all set. Yeah, I'm losing you. I'm losing the connection, but I'm all set.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry. Okay, Chris Hotel, you also had a hand up?
Yeah, I was going to just fill in a little bit. I have to speak with Mary Baker, who had authored a lot of the information for 5 Spofford Street. I had a discussion with her in person about this property and what it was and everything, and Elias Jackman, who lived in that house, did lumber. He probably brought trees down from down the river and created lumber, and then possibly was doing stuff with the ship industry with this lumber, and his deeds record it as 5 Spofford Street of having a lumber workshop in the back. The building is probably long since gone, but it talks about a workshop in there. This, like I said, this property stayed in this family for a very long time. And we had both discuss the possibility of that inlet as might that have been a man-made inlet? I mean, you'd have to probably, an archaeologist would have to look at it and see, to see, you know, if maybe that was a spot where, you know, trade would come in, you know, trees and things that went to Elias Jackman's um, wood wood business. And then the last thing I was going to say was the gentleman that had this property as recently as a few years ago. I can't. His name slips my mind right now, but he was a machinist, and he used to machine parts for people around town. Everyone knew him as like being the best machinist. He was also an amateur inventor and builder kind of things. And it's said that he invented the machine that put jelly into jelly donuts. Right there. That's the word. I'm just telling you that part. So.
Okay.
But that's it. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Hey, Mr.
All
Chairman, if I could address those comments, I disagree with the discussion with respect to Ms. Baker, but I will remind you that that was with respect to 5 Spofford. We're now looking at 11. And in terms of the gentleman that owns the property, you are correct. There is a machine shop still exists on the property. And that is the property that is known as 572 Merrimack or 11 Spofford. Again, they have driveways coming in. And those buildings are not subject, they're not old enough to be subject to the demo delay, which is why they're not before you. But again, focusing on 11 Spofford, with all due respect, you know, I mean, clearly the board, at least based on the comments I'm getting, is that this 11 Spofford, which we're focused on today, is likely to be considered for preservation. And with respect to holding off your vote on whether it's preferably preserved, I mean, if you're saying that the information you have before you leads you to believe that to be true, delaying on that vote just so that I can go do more research that will likely provide, you know, additional food for thought. I guess I'd ask the board to consider, you know, making it preferably preserved now so that our delay can start. And my client would then have the opportunity that if they wanted to do additional research and come back to the board and seek a waiver of that delay, we would do that. But with all due respect, you know, if the board feels you have enough information based on what I presented to you to determine that this is preferably preserved, what is significantly historical and therefore preferably preserved, I'd ask you to make that determination now.
Okay. Yeah, I understand that. Well, we have to start with the first vote, historically significant and considered for preservation. So would someone care to make that motion now? And I would just clarify that we are talking about the primary structure of the house here.
Yeah, I'll make that motion. This is Biff.
I'll second the motion, Mark Sundbaum.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen. Let me just note that. And going around our board, Mr. Bernhardt.
Yes.
Okay, affirmative. Okay, Biff Baus.
Yes.
Thank you, Mark Syndrome.
Yes.
Thank you, Chris Fay.
Yes.
Thank you, Chris Sautel.
Yes.
Thank you, Alan Marquis.
Yes.
Okay, and I can make that unanimous. I agree with you, gents. Now we can let me just make a note here. 1 second. I think I would agree with Mr. Duchesne's assessment that based on what he's hearing and what I'm hearing as well, is that people feel they probably have enough information to determine whether the house is preferably preserved or not, which in other words impose the 1-year delay. If if there's general consensus that we can go ahead with that, we can have a motion for that, and we'll be clear that we will ask the applicant to and Jennifer Blanchet, our zoning, enforcement officer, to try to determine more accurately what's going on with the auxiliary structure or accessory structure, rather, the garage. We'll come back to that one. Does someone care to make that motion that the structure, the house, is preferably preserved?
I'll make
This
that
is
motion.
Andrew.
Enron.
Okay, I think I heard Mark Syndrome first,
Mark
and I think I
first.
heard Andrew. We want
I
to
can be
second
the
it, Andrew?
second.
Okay,
Yes,
okay, thank you. And your vote on that, Andrew?
yes,
Okay, thank you. Biff House?
Yes.
Thank you. Mark Syndrome?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Chris Fay?
yes,
Thank you, Chris. Chris Sotell?
Yes.
Thank you. Alan Marquis?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. And I agree. All right, so we'll, as you maybe not quite so elegantly put it, we'll start the clock, if you will, on that. But can I'll communicate with the well, Andy's on the call, so he is aware of it, but I'll include a note to Jennifer Blanchet. Caitlin Sullivan is on vacation, but anyway, to coordinate with you the additional research on that accessory structure, because I do agree with some of my colleagues that it looks suspiciously like it could be 100 years old or older.
I'll make note
Okay.
of that tomorrow morning, Chair Richards.
Great, thank you, Andy. Okay, let's move right along to 570 Merrimack Street. Do you want to go ahead and say what you want to say about that one, Mr. Duchesne?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, and I will, in the interest of time, move swiftly, and if the board has any questions, please stop me. 570 Merrimack Street, according to the town's records, was built in 1914. There are no district data sheets or Form B for the subject property, nor could it be located on any of the MACRIS databases, nor have we received any information from anyone with regard to the significance. I will say this, I will certainly meet with Mr. Port to get a better understanding of, the level of research that we're expected to provide. As you know, I'm somewhat new to this town, and have learned that the local sources, the data sheets, the Form Bs, the MACRIS is certainly the primary research tools, but I will certainly meet with Andy to find out what other resources are available so that I can make sure future applications are comprehensive. With respect to 570, next picture is a picture of it, a front picture of the house, or actually, I'm sorry, again, providing you relevance to where this sits within the larger context of the property. It does have frontage on on Merrimack Street. And while we have this picture, you might notice that the structures that are located in the center of this picture on either side of that a driveway that comes in from Merrimack and from Spofford in this sort of a circular area of pavement in the middle. That is the property where the landowner lives. And that dark L-shaped building that comes off of the home is a workshop, the machine shop that was mentioned. And across from that is another garage type of structure that was used in conjunction with the machine shop. But again, those properties are less than 75 years old and so are not part of this filing. But I did want to point out where that home and workshop, machine shop that was just discussed is actually located. It's located right there in the center of everything, if you will. So 570 Merrimack, the next picture is, thank you, Andy, is the front of the home from Merrimack Street. And then I've provided, as we move around the house, photos of the, each side. of the home. And then the back of the home there, and then, so you've seen the right, left, and back of the home. Again, the styling is consistent throughout. This one does appear to have windows of the same design. So unlike that previous home that had a variety of window types, these seem to be relatively uniform. As far as our neighborhood, to the right, well, first of all, to the left of the home, and I don't have a picture, but it's the, the driveway down to the machine shop. And then eventually, as you look across, you get to Spofford Street, and then a little down Spofford is 570. This is the home to the right on Merrimack Street. So this is the house that is directly to the right of this home, and it fronts on Merrimack. The next one is, I think, just okay, now we're looking across Merrimack Street. If you look to the far right of this property, that's down at the circle. So between this home and the circle, this gray home that I depict here is the one of two homes that are directly across the street. So that is directly across Merrimack, sort of looking to the right. And this is the home looking more directly across Merrimack, if not a little to the left. So you can see that both of those homes appear to be of newer age, and that the house to the direct abutting right also is a ranch style home. So we don't seem to have surrounding historic structures in any way. And again, as I made the argument on 11, again, we do not have any information, nor was I able to find some based on the sources that I had and are familiar with, able to find any historical information about this house, in terms of who built it and who lived there. I obviously will again leave it to the commission to determine whether or not this house exhibits any of the architectural components that add to its historical significance. However, again, my client is asking the board to make those determinations tonight, so that we can, begin our delay. But I do want to say again, that my client did want me to say that with respect to this home, as well as 11, and as I mentioned earlier with respect to 5, my client, if in fact the delay is put on this home, we will make efforts to try and see if we can't find someone who is interested in taking this home in one form or another, or whether there's any interest in a salvage company in preserving some of the architectural features of these homes. And if we're able to do that, again, we would come back to this board to ask it to reconsider the delay in light of our efforts to try and preserve the homes. But in order for that clock to start and for us to, begin that effort, we do need the board to make a determination on this home as well. So thank you again for your time.
Okay, I do have one question, and it sort of borders on areas that we're not directly responsible for, but it or kind of apply to the possible saving of some of these structures. The question is this: it's my understanding that Mr. Premack plans to do some lot line redrawing and configure the land differently in terms of where the lots are and so forth. So does that require that that these structures be completely removed or not?
Well, it does with respect to 5 and 11 Spofford. As you can see, a portion of the property that is 5 Spofford, if you want to start over there, Andy, over here, 5 Spofford, there you go, up there. As you can see, that dark line, which represents the conforming A&R lots that he can create, will likely require us to incorporate some of the property from 5 Spofford. So therefore, that home cannot remain there if, in order to produce a buildable lot. And then you can see that the home at 11 Spofford actually straddles the property line between what would be 2 building lots.
Mhm.
To answer your question, Mr. Chairman, yes, those 2 homes will likely have to be removed in order to redevelop the property in this 4-lot configuration.
Mhm.
That I can't say the same to be true for 570. As you can see, the lot that is going to be created, it does in fact, the house does sit in the middle. So theoretically, that house again could theoretically remain on that new lot. However, quite frankly, Mr. Chairman, for the cost of these lots and the required structures that'll need to be built to make this a feasible project, in working with our architects, they are just not comfortable that, we could take this house at 570 and, legally add on to it enough and configure it such that it would be economically feasible to build it in order to recoup the cost of the land and the redevelopment of the home. I'm sorry to say, and the board's probably familiar with it, that sometimes the cost of adding and renovating far exceeds the cost of building a new structure. And unfortunately, that's the nature of our housing development.
Yeah, so we've been running into that. All right, well, thank you for that explanation. And before we leave this image, Andy, so the dark, heavy outlines, those are the proposed new house lots. Is that right?
That's correct.
Yes.
That's a configuration shown on top of the lighter line types are underneath, and
Right.
these darker lines are showing the new configuration. And
Okay, so
yeah, go ahead.
so those are 3, but you mentioned 4. So is the 4th kind of that's area in the middle, but it's not really highlighted
Yeah,
because it's not a part of our hearing tonight?
right. You're seeing this as the extension of this back
Okay.
line here. Yeah.
Okay. And those light dashed lines, like they're all pretty much squares. I see 4
That's
of those.
that's something relevant to the Historic Commission's jurisdiction, but it's a zoning provision that's meant to kind of create some regular shaped lots by having a square that has to fit within it
I see.
of a certain size. So this is essentially just
Okay.
showing the
All
squares
right.
can fit. Yeah.
I just wondered what that was all about. All right, thank you, Randy. Appreciate that. Okay. Anyone on the board have a question for Mr. Duchesne? And if no one does, if someone would like to make a motion that the structure is to be considered for preservation, we can entertain that motion.
This is Andrew. The structure is considered for preservation.
Okay.
Mark Sandron, I'll second the motion.
Okay, thank you, Andrew and Mark. You guys have been active tonight. Okay, so the motion on the floor is that the structure is historically significant and considered for preservation. So we'll go around our usual routine here. Starting with you, Andrew. Your
Yes.
vote. Okay, thank
Yes.
you. Biff Baus.
Yes.
Thank you. Mark Syndrome.
Yes.
Thank you. Chris Fay.
Yes.
Thank you, Chris. Chris Sautel.
Yes.
Thank you. Alan Marquis.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, so I'll make that unanimous so that so it's conserved for preservation, and as we just did a minute ago, there isn't much of a demo. Well, there isn't really a demo plan to review. It the plan, such as it is at this point, is complete demolition. Does anyone have any comment or question before we vote on whether the structure is preferably preserved or not? That yes. If that passes, that would impose a 1-year demo delay. Anyone want to make that motion?
I'll make that motion, Mark Sandron.
Okay, thank you, Mark.
I'll second that. Biff Bass.
Thank you, Biff. Okay, so the motion on the floor now is that the structure is historically significant and preferably preserved. A yes vote means that it poses the 1-year demo delay. A no vote would mean that it may be demolished without the delay. So, Andrew, your vote on that.
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Baus.
Yes.
Thank you. Mark Sandron.
Yes.
Thank you. Chris Fay.
Yes.
Thank you, Chris. Chris Sotell.
Yes.
Thank you. Alan Marquis.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And again, so another unanimous vote. So, okay, so I think the main thing we need to come back with, Mr. Duchesne, is that to talk to the planning office about that auxiliary structure for 11, I believe it was, right? The brick garage there, and I'm sure maybe I'm sorry, Andy can provide some information on what more historical information we'd like to see. I can tell you that typically, well, I mentioned it earlier, there's Sanborn insurance maps, but I don't think that part of the city, because it was later developed, I'm not sure they covered that part of the city as far back as you need. But another thing that I know is often done is searches through the local newspapers and things of that sort, because you could often in an article about the address might be mentioned, that anything from like, oh, there was a butcher shop in that location, or such and such a person lived there, and whatever, so those newspaper searches can be fruitful. All right, can we move on?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I will certainly do that, Mr. Chairman, and I do want to thank the board for all your time and consideration here. And I can assure you that we will be looking at alternatives to, preserving these structures, if not in place, but rather through, the sale or salvage of the materials, and may likely come back to the board to present to you the efforts we made, and and discuss whether
Okay.
those are sufficient. But I do want to thank you for your time. Thank you.
Okay, and coming back with that would be certainly welcomed.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, so let's move on. The next is a demolition delay hearing is for 8 Lincoln Street. I believe it's the MTC is going to represent, and I see, let's see, I know I saw Lisa Mead on who's going to be presenting for that? Is it Attorney Mead? Are you going to be presenting?
Yes,
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I will be presenting along with Matt Langis from Scott Brown's office.
Okay, that's okay. Okay, a second. Okay, I don't really have much to say. So
All right.
on this, other than that, so I'll let you. I know you're quite familiar with drill here, so I assume you're going to talk about some of the information related to historical significance, and then we'll take that vote on that motion. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. That's exactly how we'll proceed.
All right, go right ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair and members of the commission. Lisa Mead, Tellerman and Costa, 30 Green Street in Newburyport. With me this evening, I believe also on the line, you'll see Deborah and Michael Shepard, who are the owners of this property. Matt Langis from Scott Brown's office, and my colleague, Ben Taylor, if he's on, I'm not sure, but he also worked on this project with me. Next slide, please. So this is for the property at 8 Lincoln Street. Deborah and Michael are looking to renovate their home by removing what I would describe as a very awkward rear structure and replace it with a new addition. We're here because a portion of the new structure overlaps the roof of the main part of the house, which is actually the historic part of the house. The rear structure, is, I'm going to say in a minute, was built in 1999. And there is a side structure that was built probably around 1951, which has some pretty interesting information about it, but it would not obviously be considered the historic structure. So the reason we're here is because of that little bit of an overlap onto the main roof, taking in the new structure in the back. So, this is listed on the district data sheets. It was constructed around 1859, according to the assessor's records, and 1885, according to the district data sheets. The 1914 Sanborn map and the 1924 assessor's map, which, by the way, is available for the entire city, appears that the addition on the east of the main structure, which we're going to talk about in a minute, was later added. And we were able to find information on an old assessor's card related to that addition, in addition to a newspaper advertisement. So we do have a pretty good idea that that was built around 1951. The district data sheets describe the house as an Italianate cottage. And as I said, the assessor's records show that the easterly addition was built on 1951. And then we have a newspaper article that talks about how Lorraine Grollo, who was the co-owner of the property from 1951 to 1980, opened a hair salon. And you can see how the doors might suggest that that occurred in that easterly addition. Next slide, please. So on this Sanborn map, you can see you've got Marlborough Street on the left, and you have Lincoln Street. And as you travel to the east down towards Beacon Street, you can see the property there. And it's interesting to see that footprint. And in a minute, you can compare it to the 1924 map. So this is the 1914 Sanborn map. Next slide, please. And here we have the 1924 assessor's map. And you have, again, the house looks pretty much like the same footprint as in 1914. Next slide, please. And here we have the assessor's map, or excuse me, the site plan. And you can see in on Lincoln Street at the bottom of this sheet, there's an addition that's kind of bumped in a little bit in the front and then runs to, I guess it would be not the east, but to the south. And that's that addition that was put on in 1951. And when you see the front of the house, you can kind of see that where that added. You can see the other addition on the back of this footprint in the hatched underneath. And the addition is the proposed addition in the back is that kind of peachish color. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Next slide, please. And here's the advertisement in the newspaper that shows that the beauty shop was opened at 8 Lincoln Street by Lorraine Grollo. And this was in 1951. Next slide, please. And here's the assessor's record dated 1951. And you can see under the remarks, it shows the addition that was constructed. And those dimensions are the exact dimensions of that southerly addition as well. So we believe, next slide, please. And so here you can see that on the left of this photo, you can see the main original house and that addition that was put on in 1951 on the left. And in the rear, you can see that lower one-story addition that's in the back that we're proposing to remove. Next slide, please. And here is the front elevation of the house. And again, you can see where that entry goes into that new addition that was put on in 1951. Next slide, please. And here's the southerly elevation where that new addition was put on. Next slide, please. And here's the 1999 addition in the rear. And next slide. And that's, again, that 1999 addition. And I think, yep, and that's the 1999 edition. And then we took some photos of the cellar from in the 1951 edition, and you can see the materials that were used in that construction. And there's a clear delineation. Doesn't show it quite so much. Next slide, please. But here you go. Here's the beams that are in that and the insulation that was used. Next slide, please. And here's the meeting of the two foundations Next slide, please. Then there's your electrical box and the wiring, kind of gives you an idea of the date of that addition. Next slide, please. And then there we go. That's the floor joist, and of course the floor above it, and on 1951 edition. Next slide, please. As opposed to the original structure from the late 1800s foundation. Next slide, please. And similar with that. And next slide, please. So with that, Mr. Chair, we're happy to have the board make a determination of historical significance given the age of the structure.
All right, thank you, Attorney Mead. Does anyone have a question on the panel? Have a question for Attorney Mead? If not, a motion that the structure is historically significant and considered for preservation would be in order. If someone would like to make that.
I can make that motion. Biff Bass.
Okay, that sounded like Biff, right? Okay, thank you,
I'll
Mr.
second the
Bass.
motion, Mark Sendron.
Thank you, Mark. Okay. So Mr. Bernhardt, your vote on that.
Yes.
Thank you. Biff Bass.
Yes.
Thank you. Mark Syndrome.
Yes.
Thank you. Christopher Fay.
Yes.
Thanks. Chris Sotell.
Yes.
Okay. Alan Markey.
Yes.
Thank you. And I'll make that unanimous. So it is to be considered for preservation, which means brings us to the demolition plan review, which I'm sure Attorney Mead is prepared for. So would you like to proceed with that, Attorney Mead?
Yes, thank you very much. So again, here's the site plan. And Andy, if you could just blow it up a little bit, that would be super. So as you can see from the footprint anyway, we're not doing anything to the original structure as well as the 1951 edition. And what's happening is we're removing the 1999 edition in the back and constructing an addition in its place that has a porch and a deck off both the right-hand side and the rear. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Matt to go through the elevations, which start on the next slide, and discuss the actual architectural work that's being done.
Perfect. Thank you, Lisa. Good evening, everyone. My name is Matt Landis from Scott Brown Architects, 48 Market Street, Newburyport. Just wanted to recap some of what Lisa has already mentioned. This home has gone through a number of additions over the years. The original box of the house, which is the front-facing gable, constructed in 1859, according to the assessor's records, and subsequent additions were completed much later and are not original to the home. The first is just off the left of the existing box, as you're looking at the front elevation. That was built somewhere in the mid to late 50s based on the photos that were provided just a second ago. And the second, more recent first floor additions off the rear of the house in 1999. And the latter is the area where we're focusing our attention with the proposed addition. So that was indicated, the shaded box in the site plan. And our intention rather is to preserve the existing left and rear lines of the existing first floor addition and extending it right and upward. This sheet specifically shows the existing and proposed front elevation. We're proposing a new door and surround, which is a strategic choice on our end because we believe that after some demolition, we'll likely unveil some traces of the original door's placement from 1859. But the overall focus, though, with the design is keeping in line with the vernacular that's present along Lincoln Street. Our proposed drawings are reflective of sort of a Victorian style renovation and addition, which we believe integrates pretty well with the neighboring character. The current siding, the windows and trim are all not original, and it's a combination of vinyl and aluminum for material. But the proposed updates use new clad wood windows, a classic 2/2 grill style pattern, simulated divided lights, a traditional 4-inch exposure clapboard siding, and enhanced rake and eave trim, new entrance surround that I mentioned earlier, as well as rooflet and brackets that would be the same vintage of a house, around this time, 1850s or so. Next slide, please. So this is the right elevation. It shows a better view of the proposed secondary entrance and then the extension off the rear, with the red dotted line being the delineating factor between the junction. The junction between the original and the proposed structures. So this is showing where those two meet. Next slide, please. This is the rear elevation. We're using and following the existing scale in the roof line by branching off of it for the expansion. We're also maintaining the existing pitch, but lifting the right eave line to align with the left, with the entire purpose of bringing symmetry and proportion to the addition and to better match the rest of the house. Next slide, please. This is the left elevation. It provides a bit of a clearer perspective of how we're maintaining a modest profile with the addition and keeping the gable eaves low and lifting a shed dormer. That dormer runs across and lands into the existing ridge, but will be hidden from the view from the street. And as Lisa had mentioned, where the dormer overlays on the existing box of the house is why we're here tonight. We've spent a ton of time and energy going through a number of iterations on the scale, the height, the location of the addition, but ultimately we believe the drawings before you tonight are the most appropriate integration architecturally with not only the existing house, but also the context of the neighborhood as well. But with that being said, we sort of, we also understood that the flat 2D drawings can be deceiving and might not capture our full intent with the project. Next slide, please. So knowing that, we wanted to work through the addition three-dimensionally and provide a couple of exterior renderings that would better illustrate the scope of the project and how it has a minimal change to the existing streetscape. From this view, actually, the addition is totally unnoticeable. Instead, the upgrades to the renovation become the focus. Next slide, please. And then from this view, the addition has a minor noticeable change to the view from the front, from the street. But this is mainly due to the continuation of that existing wall with the proposed addition that extends closer to the rear of the property. Next slide, please. So this is a sheet of all the existing photos. Some of these you saw before with Lisa toggling through them, but just for comparison, that first existing photo in the top left is almost the exact view of the rendering from the previous sheet. So with the exception of the bump out and the rest of the changes in the rendering, they're all qualitative in nature for the most part. All of the existing siding, the windows, the trim, and the shutters will all be stripped, removed, and replaced with higher quality materials that I had mentioned earlier. Next slide, please. And lastly, this is the DCOD calculation for reference, mainly showing the concentration of the work to be done in the rear of the house. That, for the most part, I would say concludes my portion of the presentation, but I'd be happy to address any questions or concerns or provide any additional information about the project. But in the meantime, I'd turn it back over to Attorney Mead.
Thank you, Matt. Next slide, please, Andy. So as Matt indicated, and I don't need to go through every item on this slide, but they have brought back a lot of the detail that has been missing due to the use of the siding in the 1951 edition. And they are sure that the addition in the rear complements the original structure and the architectural integrity of the house. Just to give you some context, next slide, please. So here is the property. It's actually one of the larger properties on Lincoln Street, but you can see how the house is elongated right now with that addition, that one-story addition in the back from 1999, and you can see how it sits on the property. Next slide, please. And again, here's some context for the neighborhood. So this is 4 Lincoln Street. This is a couple of doors down. Next slide. And here we have 6 Lincoln Street. Again, because the lots on Lincoln Street are so deep, the additions have been mostly obviously focused to the rear of these structures. But you can also see the architectural style that Matt was referring to that exists in the neighborhood. Next slide, please. And this is 5 Lincoln Street, so it's across the street. Next slide, please. And actually what's interesting, the door overhang, and that's of course not the appropriate architectural term, but the door overhang here and the one on the last slide are all reminiscent of the same era, which Matt and Scott intend to put back on to 8 Lincoln Street. Next slide, please. And here's 10 Lincoln Street. So this is right next door. Next, and that has the same entry. 13 Lincoln Street. Again, we're talking about the additions to the rear of all of these and out a little bit to the side. Next slide, please. And this is 14 and 12 Lincoln. All of these have the same, architectural style. Next slide, please. And this is 40 Lincoln, 16 Lincoln, it's slide 40, sorry. 16 Lincoln, again, the same detail on the windows and the door overhang and trim. Next slide, please. And then again, this is the rendering, a model, I guess I should say, of the front of the property. So with that, we would like the board to release the delay and approve these plans so that the applicants can move forward with the renovations of this house. I think that everybody can agree that that addition in the rear is more of an incursion into the neighborhood than actually a complement to it, and the proposed renovations and addition would be much more of a complement to the historic structure than the existing. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. We're happy to answer any questions. Mr. Chair, I think you're muted.
I was muted. Thank you, sir. Sorry about that. But I do have one question, but before I speak, anyone on the panel have a question for either Attorney Mead or Matt, representing the architect? While you're thinking it over, my one question was about the height of the roof in the rear. Because that's the one thing, and it's good that you did the renderings because they show actually, and if you want to go to 42, the very next slide, it's the same rendering, but from the other side, looking kind of to the, this one, you can just about see, that kind of bugs me a little bit. So I'm just wondering if this is really a question, I guess, for Matt. Was it impossible to avoid, that one little kind of glitch to the roof line there? Just seems a little
Yeah, I mean,
odd.
it really was. I mean, and that's why we did the renderings, because this was probably like our 10th pass at it in trying to get this right architecturally. It's a bit deceiving. That ridge is only 1 foot 9 inches higher than the existing ridge. But that was the main focus, to push it as far back as we possibly could so you could barely notice it. A lot of our focus was trying to make sure that this addition off the back was done proportionally and symmetrically, and made sure that it better matched some of the proportions of the existing house, and this is where we landed, and part of that was sort of working our way backwards a little bit from the inside and seeing how tight we can get the ceiling on the second floor, and seeing how far we can really push that gable down before we started to create space on the second floor that wasn't livable. And so we're left with pretty modest ceiling heights of like 7.5 feet on the second floor, and tried to make sure that although this is higher by 1 foot 9 inches, if you were to measure it from the midpoint of the gable, it's almost the exact same distance as the existing in the front. I think it's off by maybe a half inch or so. So from a like a zoning perspective to the midpoint of the ridge and how that's measured, because the eaves are a little bit different and lower,
Right.
the heights would be relatively the same.
Yeah. Well, of course, the visible thing isn't so much the midpoint as the
Right.
as the peak or ridge. All right. Well, thanks for that. It sounds like I'm not sure if it was it's maybe there's a floor height difference that required that additional height, or maybe some building code issue, whatever. We don't need to get into all that, but sounds like at least you were certainly aware of that issue and tried to mitigate it. Any other questions from the panel before we turn to public comment? Not seeing any. Okay, very quickly then I'll open a public comment period again. Please raise your hand using the Zoom controls. If you're on the phone, I believe that's a *9, *6 to unmute. And if you hear us call your name to recognize you, that's your cue to unmute yourself on your end, and with your name and address, make your brief comment. So we'll allow a few seconds to allow people to figure out how to raise their hand or whatever. There may not be any public comment, but I'll just allow several seconds here to see if anyone's going to step up to the microphone, virtually speaking. Not seeing any activity. Going once, going twice. Sold. Okay, so we'll close the public comment period, not having gotten any public comment. Let's see here. Hang on a second. I just made a mistake in my notes here. I find it very helpful to try to keep my notes going as we progress. Okay. So any discussion among the panelists here? I do see a hand. Mr. Sautel, did you have a comment or something?
Yes, I did. It's strictly a comment. I just want to say I really love the idea of putting the original door back on, and I hope that when they do it, that they photograph and document anything that would be hidden underneath the siding that says the door was there. And I think it looks wonderful. That's all.
Okay, thank you, Chris. I'll just comment that, especially when you look at the neighborhood photos that were provided, it's a remarkably consistent neighborhood. I suspect that this was all developed around the same time. The architectural consistency, if discounting for later relatively minor or major modifications like additions and things, it's pretty remarkably consistent, as I think you'll agree. They all have that kind of late 19th century appearance with a few little fairly minor Italianate touches like the brackets around the doors and so on. Okay, anyone else have a comment? If not, we can entertain a motion that the structure is significant and preferably preserved. And if that passes, we can also consider the plans that have been submitted and discussed, whether we want to approve those as is or with any possible suggestions or whatever. Would someone care to make a motion on the structure being preferably preserved?
Sandra, I make a motion that's preferably preserved.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. Is there a second?
I'll
Sure, I'll
second the motion, Mark Sedma.
I heard two people, but I definitely heard Mark there towards the end. I think someone else was there. But anyway, it's seconded. So take the vote. Andrew Bernhardt, your vote on this. There's a yay vote means it's preferably preserved. So it would impose a demo delay, which we could add our option, take another vote to accept the plans as presented, or at least we'll consider those after this vote. If it's not preferably preserved, that if this motion fails, then it's moot. Okay, anyway, your vote, Andrew.
Yes.
Thank you. Biff Baus.
Yes.
Thank you. Mark Sandrone.
I'll vote no.
Okay. No. Chris Fay.
Yes.
Thank you. Chris Sautel.
Yes.
Okay. Alan Marquis.
Yes.
Okay. Also a yes. So I'm gonna guess that we did have a no vote. My guess is that that may have been engendered by the plans being submitted being favorably received by the panel. I know Chris Sautel already commented on that. My own comments are that I was very happy to see in that rendering that one thing that was a little bit objectionable is virtually invisible from any normal street views, and especially given what the architects have proposed in terms of the improvements to the quality of the materials to be used and applied to the house in terms of the sheathing and so forth, um, and the kind of restoration to what something that's more consistent with the age of the house in terms of the location and style of the entryway and so on. I think a lot of us see those as positive changes. Would anyone care to make a motion that we accept the plans and lift the demolition delay?
I'll make that
It's
motion.
Andrew, and
Sandron?
I make a motion that we lift the delay and accept the plans.
Okay, while you were speaking, Andrew, Mark beat you to it. So do you
Okay.
want to second Mark's
I
motion?
will second.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so let me take your votes here. 1 second. Okay, well, Andrew, your vote on
Yes.
accepting the plans, you're yes.
Yes.
Mr. Biff Baus.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Mark Sandron.
Yes.
Thank you. Christopher Fay.
Yes.
Thank you. Chris Sartell.
Yes.
Thank you. Alan Marquis.
Yes.
Okay, well, I'll make it unanimous then. So as I'm sure you know, Attorney Mead and Matt, so the demo delay was briefly imposed for a matter of maybe seconds and has now been lifted. So the applicant, can proceed with this, assuming any other requirements are met, and the other boards, of course, with these plans. And thank you for your time and attention, although I see that Attorney Mead is not going anywhere quite yet. So we're
Thank you
done with
very
the,
much.
yeah,
Thank you very much, everyone.
okay, thank you, Matt. So 8 Lincoln Street is done and decided. We move to our last demolition delay hearing, number 9, 56th Street, out on the end of Plum Island there on the ocean side of the bay. Well, not the bay, what do they call it? The basin. The structure is over 75 years old. Now, this is a little bit similar to our earlier ones in that it is a full demo, but the applicant does have a demo / rebuild plan. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Attorney Mead. I assume you're speaking for the applicant here?
I am. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and members of the commission. With me this evening also is Eileen Graff, and then the owner of the property, Stephen Marshall. Eileen, of course, is the architect on the project, and my colleague Ryan Clemens as well. Mr. Chair, I think I felt like we've just covered the entire Merrimack River tonight, right? Starting all the way at the west end of the city, and here we are out on Plum Island. And this property, if you go to the next slide, Andy, this property is located, actually, it's on 2 lots, 7 and 9 56th Street. And they're taken together for the purpose of this. It's in the R3 zoning district in the Plum Island overlay district, which of course has its own challenges unrelated to just about anywhere else in the city because of the other regulatory constraints on the properties. It is currently a single-story Cape bungalow with a simple window layout. Was constructed in 1944, according to the assessor's records. Not surprisingly, there's nothing on the district data sheets. There's no Form Bs. It's not on the 1924 assessor's records because they don't exist. It didn't exist at the time. And so this is typical Plum Island. I am here to say that while we believe, of course, that the house is historically significant because of the definition in the ordinance, because it's at least 75 years old, we do not believe that it should be preferably preserved. And so we'll go through that both at the same time, if that's all right with you, Mr. Chair. So we're going to propose to raise the existing house and build a new 2-story single-family home that complies with the building requirements, the FEMA standards, the Conservation Commission standards out on Plum Island. And it, of course, will have to go to the Zoning Board of Appeals as well as the Conservation Commission. So here's the property. Next slide, please. So it is a typical cottage from Plum Island, which there are many of out there still. And it has a solid, well, solid, I'm going to put in quotes. It has somewhat of a solid foundation, and therefore, of course, doesn't meet any of the current standards on the island. Next slide, please. And here's a side view of it. You're going to see as we go around here, it's kind of interesting that the foundation is painted 2 different colors here. But the house was actually built in pieces and parts, as we're going to talk about in a little bit, over a period of time, which is not unusual for the island. And so that's kind of apropos to the way the house was built as well. Next slide, please. And here's a rear picture of it. Again, you can see some of the materials that are used are undersized. We're going to show you inside the house a little bit in the basement so you can see that more readily. Next slide, please. And here's the other side of the house in the rear. And next slide. And here we have the full other side of the house. And so this house, again, is to raise it. While it's historically significant, we don't think that it should be preferably preserved. And you go to the next slide, please. So here's some of, and I'm going to have Eileen, you should pop in here anytime you think that I'm going to miss something on some of these interior slides. But I think as we talk about the preservation question, you remember what you've heard so many times this evening already, but that the ordinance, the demolition ordinance, is to preserve and protect significant buildings or structures that constitute or reflect distinctive features of the architecture, cultural, or political, or economic, or social history of the city. Here, there's very little public interest, we believe. In fact, there are other areas of public interest that strongly encourage the removal of this building and replacement with an appropriately designed house for Plum Island. So these photos show some of the foundation and basement. Next slide, please. There's many cracks around the foundation. It's been patched. It's mostly cement block. It's got some patched concrete here and there. The timbers, next slide, please, are undersized and or are scrap material that are not resting on anything appropriate and or directly on the sand. As you can see here, next slide, please. And then you'll see that there are many areas that are notched and not put in properly. There are beams on top of beams without any appropriate supports. Next slide, please. But it goes to the very nature. And again, you've got here very undersized columns holding up beams that were not properly constructed for the floor and area above. Next slide, please. And here's another section of the house, undersized carrying beams holding up the floor on top of the cement blocks. Next slide, please. Again, kind of haphazard construction. You can see the multiple different patchwork of materials used to do the construction and or reconstruction and addition in this house. Next slide, please. Again, this is actually one of my favorites because you can just pick out about any kind of lumber you want here except the right size. You know, look, you can see the beam that's holding up the edge, column that's holding up the edge of a beam that's got 2x4s and 2x-whatevers holding up things that I'm surprised the house hasn't fell down so far. Next slide, please. Again, here's the basement. You've got a column, half column sitting on top of partial cinder block, some sitting on top of the sand. Next slide, please. And then again, this is inside in the ceiling, and you can see the undersized material used in here, and actually the miscellaneous kind of material that you can see that are used in here for the second floor. And next slide, please. And again, that's in the rafters themselves. So with that, before we go on, I guess I would ask the board to, and Eileen, is there anything you want to add relative to the current construction and condition of the house before we go on to the historic significance and preferably preserved vote?
Um, the, actually, Lisa, you did an amazing job explaining all that, the types of framing, et cetera. So, so you've covered most of it. Simply stated, as these photographs convey, is really an assembly of any available material possible over time that they use to put this house together. Again, the main form, the main gable being the primary first part, and then they have the covered porch up front, and then at some point the addition in the rear. So really, it's a very sort of humble, modest, typical cottage, framed, completely undersized to today's standards. So the idea of building attached to, in considering primarily that foundation, which does not have proper footings, and that's clear in the movement of the block wall. It's either buckling or cracking. So the idea of adding to that, you would have to be removing what's there and then rebuilding in today's standards. So the idea of preserving what's there is a very difficult scenario in terms of improving the property. But otherwise, I think the photos speak for the conditions in which it's built pretty clearly. Thank you.
So that's all we have for your first two votes, Mr. Chair.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much. Andy, quick question for you. I believe we can ask or require that if a structure is going to be demolished, that it be photographically documented for just for historical purposes. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think it makes sense to ask for that. It's happened on a few occasions, at least
Yeah.
during my tenure here.
Yeah, the reason I say that is because, there's no question that this structure is of questionable value at this point, right? But I think that there's also from my prior experience with my fellow colleagues on the board, a desire to not totally lose aspects of the city's history. And Plum Island presents an interesting challenge. On the one hand, as Attorney Mead pointed out, the structure is no longer, suitable or appropriate given the flooding, storm conditions, et cetera, and so forth, not to mention building codes and so on. And but on the other hand, it represents a period of time out on Plum Island when these little, call them slightly grander than shacks, were kind of the norm. So that's my interest in at least documenting it if we decide that it's not to be preserved.
Yeah,
So
Mr. Chair, we don't have any, as you know, we provide pretty complete files for the commission for that very purpose. And so if you want additional documentation other than the photos that we've provided, we're happy to provide those to the city.
Okay. Thank you, Attorney Mead. So among the panelists here, anyone have any questions for Attorney Mead? Okay, so the first vote is, well, we know it's over 75 years old, so that, but we need to decide if it's considered for preservation or not. And we can make a motion that it's well, not a motion. So the motion, they were phrased in the positive, so we'd say it's historically significant and considered for preservation. A no vote would mean that it's therefore not considered for preservation. But as I was saying a minute ago, we can, it may require maybe some slightly enhanced documentation, just so we have a historical record of what was there. Anyway, would someone care to make a motion on whether this structure should be considered for preservation?
This is Andrew, and I make the motion that it be considered for preservation.
Okay, thank you, Andrew Bernhardt. Is there a second?
I'll second that. Chris Fay.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Fay. Okay, so round our voting again. Andrew, your vote on that?
No.
Okay. Mr. Baus?
No.
Okay, Mark Sandron.
No.
Mr. Fay?
I have to vote yes.
Okay, I wondered
You
if
know,
you would.
you know.
We
This
know
is
you,
this
yeah.
is this is gonna hurt. This
I
is
know
gonna
it.
hurt.
Yep, I
I will vote yes.
understand. I totally understand. Chris Hotel.
Yes.
Okay, Alan Marquis.
No.
Okay. And I'm gonna actually vote no, but I am going to you have submitted quite a few photographs, so that's good. I think the only thing, what I would ask is, the kind of photographs that typically would document something like this. So similar to what you've done, only like, not have recycling bins or trash bins in front and cars in the driveway, just so it's a clearer picture of the structure. And I think we can probably get the dimensions from the plot plan, right?
Yeah, those will be all in the plot plan, Mr. Chair. And
Okay.
so we would be happy to submit those, what do you say, prior to the issuance of any demo permit?
Yeah, that'd be great. And
Okay.
I don't think we need to. I don't see any historical features of note that require special documentation, such as elaborate cornices and what have you. So those appear to be quite absent. And this is, it reminds me very much of a friend of mine was living for a while in a structure there that the floors kind of bounced when you walked across. This is
Kind of.
very typical old Plum Island.
Yeah.
Mr. Fay, did you have a comment?
I
see your
just
hand.
had a request because I don't know. There's something endearing about this little summer shack, but if
Yeah.
there are any older photos, I won't say super historic, but if a family whatever, it'd be great to be able to document like it's summer 1950 whatever, and the kids, you know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah. Mr. Fay, so I think what's kind of fun about this, and it might help you a little bit here, is that the applicant's parents own this property. And
Okay.
the applicant and his sister spent a lot of time out here. The house is going to be removed, and the proposal is to have an in-law apartment as part of the new house, so the applicant's parents get to continue to stay out here. And so I will certainly ask if there are any photos they would be willing to share of the cottage when it was younger, shall we say.
Was it just a summer cottage at one point, or was it always a year round? Do you know? Do they know?
More recently, it has been year round, but I don't know. I have to presume at some point it was probably just a summer cottage, but I don't know the answer to that. I don't know the answer.
I wish it didn't look so cute. I think
Yeah.
I would sleep better tonight.
It's really hard. We'll do all of those things for sure. And this is not related to this application, but I think that there's going to be there's some tug and pull on the island, right? I mean, there's some real big issues that are happening out there. And if a person is going to try to improve their property, they are required under the conservation regulations to actually make it compliant with the FEMA requirements in the building code. And they just can't do it otherwise. So
Right. Great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Chris Hotel, did you? Oh, your hand went down again. You all set?
No, actually, I just had a comment. And this is just only my observation. Was that I've always found it interesting with a lot of older houses, the building techniques that went into them. My house, for example, has ship parts that were built into it, and I know it's like in this example, as Attorney Mead has mentioned, it's kind of like a hodgepodge mishmash of building materials that came in. But I've always found it fascinating, though, that when you actually can see this, that there's actually identifiable pieces of building material from Newburyport's past that was probably incorporated. Whether it's, you know, newspaper stuff in the walls or parts of packing crates that still have identifiable marks on them. I've just always found that fascinating and interesting. So yeah, if it's documented, things like that are always very nice also to consider. That's all. It's just my opinion.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
We'll
So
get-
I think
we'll get-
you
we'll
get
make
the
sure-
idea.
We'll make sure we get you, you know, the documentation we can prior to the issuance
Yeah.
of the demo permit.
Okay, thank you very much, Attorney Mead. And I think that I know you had plans and everything prepared, but for the sake of time, since the demo plan review is not required in this case, the preferably, excuse me, considered for preservation motion not passing, you can we can skip that.
Correct. Right.
Okay, so in that case, we can move along in our meeting here. I think the next thing falls under general business.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you, Attorney Mead, and good evening.
You too.
And also Ms. Graff, the architect, thank you as well. There was just a piece of a comment from the member of the public on 14 Payson Street. This was something that referred to something we had earlier, and let's say 14. Well, refresh my memory, Andy.
14 Norman.
Yeah. Why does it say Payson? Yeah. Okay, that's what I thought. That's why you heard me hesitating, and you heard my brain stripping gears. Yeah. So anyway, those of you who read that, I was very that was very. I replied to that person. I think I copied you, Biff, as vice chair, thanking them for their public comment. Basically, what they said was they were kind of in agreement with what this board had, the conclusion we had come to regarding the house on Norman Street, where we wanted to preserve the streetscape, preserve that historical aspect of that whole community and so on. And at the end, he said, you know, maybe hurting myself here. I think the term he used was shooting himself in the foot, because it might affect his property value negatively or something by keeping some of those little, you know, at small aspect housing and what have you. But anyway, so my letter just thanked him for his comment and taking the time to do that. If you haven't already read it, it's worth reading that. I was very gratified that someone who was a direct abutter agreed with our assessment on that one. Speaking of that, I'll just briefly mention, I believe Caitlin and Andy are trying to set up meeting. The developer, Braden, whatever his name was, wants to has some ideas he wants to discuss with Andy and myself, just to, you know, get to guide his planning for what he might come back to this board and propose. So what I expect to do is basically give him the the Secretary standards when and how, you know, what they are for adding on to a property that's considered historic, so that you know, I don't think it's our business to try to design something for him. That wouldn't be appropriate, but we certainly want him to understand what the guidelines are and use those in coming up with whatever he can come up with. Okay. If there are no questions on that, we can take a vote on the approval of the minutes from the 28th of March. Is there a motion to approve those?
I'll make that motion.
Okay,
Biff Buss.
thank you, Biff. Is that seconded?
Andrew, second.
Thank you, Andrew. Second here. And I don't have quite handy who was absent at that meeting. I think people were here except for, I'm not sure about Mr. Marquis, might have been out. Anyway, so let's go take your voting. Andrew, your vote on that?
Yes.
Okay. Biff Baus?
Yes.
Thank you. Mark Syndrome?
Yes.
Were you here? Yeah, yeah, you were here, right? Last meeting? Okay.
Oh, yes.
Chris Fay?
Yes. Excuse me. Yes.
Okay. Mr. Sartell, was that the one you missed, or were you here?
You know, I don't know. I think I was.
All right, well,
How about I abstain from that
Okay.
until further notice?
okay, well, okay, and Ms. Alan Markey, were you here?
I was, yes,
Okay, and you approve?
I do.
Okay, and I'm gonna abstain too, mainly because I meant to review them, and never did get a chance to. But I'm sure they're probably fine, so I'm not gonna, but even with my abstention, that we still have let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 affirmative votes, so the minutes, sorry, well, from that meeting would be approved. Andy, there was something in the agenda, might have either this meeting, last meeting, it said about regulatory jurisdiction, and I have no idea what that is. Is that, do you remember? Is that something I can safely ignore?
Sorry, for the next agenda, you mean, or
It may have been a holdover in my
It-
notes
it- I-
from last time.
Yeah, I'll defer to you. I don't recall there being any discussion of adding something, but it may have been something to carry over of revisiting just a review of the commission's jurisdiction and process and how it relates to other things, as we did a couple times before, like with Jared Argument, we did that once a couple years back, and then we did it again. I'm not sure if it's carryover from that, but I don't really actually recall us discussing a desire to put that on the
Okay.
recent agenda, and we're happy to do that, of course, but.
Okay. All right,
It's
well,
good, I think, when there's a turnover on the commission to review that sort of thing, but
Okay.
defer to you, yeah.
Okay, well, I don't think we're gonna try to add that right now, certainly. It wasn't on the published agenda anyway. Any comment, Andy, on, I believe we're still on to go back to in-person meetings for later in the month, the
That's right, the
25th?
next meeting will be in person, so yeah, look for Caitlin's reminder email, but for the meeting, but remember that that will be in person for that meeting, so.
Okay, and that is
we'll
at the
continue
senior
to have the
center,
hybrid.
correct?
Correct, we'll have the hybrid setup, like we do the rest of the boards where folks can still patch in remotely, but we'll be in the senior center.
Okay, do we know which room yet?
I do not recall the top of my head. I can check. I
Okay.
would suggest, by the way, so we're typically in the boardroom. If you're familiar with the senior center, second floor boardroom, primary boardroom. There's a secondary room that's like the computer classroom. It's sort of a backup room for our purposes. Doesn't quite work as well. So we'll be in there, and I think on a couple of occasions, I think only because that room had been the boardroom had been reserved.
Okay, I'm sure it'll be on a reminder email, and I would certainly encourage everyone to plan to, leave enough time and travel time, so to speak, and getting settled in time to get ourselves organized. For those of you who, it's only, I think, probably me and Christopher Fay have been around long enough to remember when we met in person and there was piles and piles of paper documentation. They've done away with that. So if you want, is the network down there capable of supporting, if people, what do you recommend then as far as people bringing laptops or not? I think you do project.
I was going to say, good question. Yeah. So generally speaking, we're going to be presenting this information on a screen that's in the room. So you'd be seeing the same information. You're welcome to bring a device. There's Wi-Fi there to use. I don't think although I wouldn't necessarily encourage us testing the limits. We haven't run into a situation yet where people running their computers on the Wi-Fi simultaneously creates an issue. So I think we're fine. But generally speaking, if you are bringing your computer and you are for any reason logging into this material, as a commission member, we would want you to mute yourself so you're not overlapping noises in the room, the devices. But yeah, this will all be on the screen. You're welcome to bring your devices and connect to Wi-Fi and whatnot during the meeting.
All right, very good. So that will be interesting to get back to that. Let's hope between now and then there isn't some sudden resurgence of pandemic, whatever. Okay, I think that's it.
Mention that I'll be away next week for the
Okay,
next
Mark.
meeting.
Okay,
Yep.
I'll make a note
I'll
of
be
that. Thank you.
away, Sally.
Okay, and I'm suspected Neumer might be as well, because he mentioned that one of the reasons he was absent tonight was he was preparing for some travel related to this upcoming wedding. I think it was, I'm not sure if it's his daughter or whatever it was, but anyway, thank you, Mark. Okay, if nothing else, the chair would entertain a motion to adjourn tonight's meeting.
Motion to adjourn, Mark Cendron.
Okay, thank you, Mark.
Second.
Second.
Chris Littell.
I think I heard Biff first. Sorry, sorry, Chris.
You can give it to Chris.
Thank you, Bill.
Now I got to change my notes. Okay. Is there any member opposed? Speak now. If not, I'll assume it's a unanimous vote to adjourn.
All good.
Okay.
Nice, gents.
Very good. So thank you all for your attention, and I'm glad we're able to kind of move along relatively expeditiously. I was a little worried with 5 demo delays, but here, when it's not all too late tonight. So thank you all for your time and attention, and see you in a couple of weeks at the Senior Center. Well, Senior Center, those of you who are able to attend.
Thank you.
Take care.
Hey,
Good night,
take care,
guys.
folks.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Okay, thanks, Andy.
Good night.